Welcome to another episode of Mindful City, Tuning into Life, a podcast that brings you an intimate exploration of the businesses, practitioners, and artists making an impact in our community. Join us on Patreon for an exploration of all the people, places, and things that raise consciousness in our community by telling us about the businesses and happenings you'd like to know more about, and we'll explore them for you. Welcome to another episode of Mindful Cities, Tuning into Life. Today I'm your host, Helen Blocker, and I have with me as our guest, Monica Duchesne from Strength and Shanti. And interestingly enough, I have a lot of questions. You know why? I was so prompted by the name of your workshop, My Fat Asana workshop that you've developed. And I've seen it for a little while, actually, for a few years, actually. I've been seeing it. And I'm like, I need to talk to her. I have tons of questions. And I really wanted to get you on the show. And I wanted to welcome you to the show officially.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you for having me. This is lovely to be here.
Thank you, Monica. I want to get right into it.
Let's do it.
Why My Fat Asana workshop? What is going on? How did you get there? And from someone who's in a larger body, I'm going to tell you, I couldn't quite wrap my head around, is this a good thing for me? Am I positive about it? How do I feel good about it? Do I feel sad about it? I couldn't quite wrap my own head around it. And I know it is a positive thing. And these are things that I think anyone in a larger body faces. How did you get to a place of such positivity and love for your body and creating a workshop such as this?
It's interesting. When I first started practicing yoga, this was in 2014. I was I would say almost always the only big person in the room, the only big-bodied woman in the room, and usually also the only brown person in the room too. And so I always felt like an anomaly in all of the yoga spaces. And when my friends convinced me to go to India and do a yoga teacher training, at first I was, really against it because I didn't really care for yoga as much. I really just like to travel. And so they kind of posed it as this, oh, we're going to go on this vacation and do a little yoga thing. And 200 hours of yoga training later, I became a certified instructor. But when I came back to the States, um, I just never really saw, and even in my yoga training, honestly, I never saw anybody that really looked like me. Most people were very fit, very small. And so, one thing that my guru in India would emphasize is that yoga is truly for every type of body, and we just got to figure out how to modify things to make it for you. And so when I started teaching yoga, I was really looking for like a mentor, somebody who could help me figure out my yoga practice to better suit my body. And I was searching and searching, and I couldn't find anyone who would host a fat yoga space.
Mhm.
And my friends said to me, well, you are a yoga teacher after all at this point, so why don't you just start it yourself? So
Exactly.
I mean, that's what it is, right? It's like if you can't find it, you have to create it. So I created this yoga workshop specifically for the big-bodied folks who like to stretch and move, but don't necessarily know how to make yoga work for them. And I
Mm-hmm.
usually just give all kinds of tips and tricks that I've learned over the years that make the practice more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Accessibility is like really just the biggest part of it to me, to make sure that I think sometimes people are like, oh, I can't do yoga. I can't touch my toes. Why would I even
Mm-hmm.
try to do yoga? And I'm like, this is really not what it's about. It's really just about connecting with your body and your breath. And if we can find a way to support you in these stretches so that you can get that good, deep stretch that you're searching for, um, whether it's like moving your belly out of the way
Mm-hmm.
or kind of like strapping your chest down and being able to twist that way, we just have to find the ways to make it work. And so I've realized that every yoga pose has variations.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than even calling what we offer, I used to just call them modifications. And now I've realized that there's no point in calling it a modification because a modification
Right.
means that it's like there's a
Like
standard.
you're
And
not doing it right. It's
right,
like,
exactly. So it's not a modification, it's just a variation of the same type of pose.
I
Um,
love that change in seeing it
yeah.
that way.
And
Yeah.
I think that, like, for me, once I had a couple of teachers who helped me recognize that we could make this pose work for you, let's just, well, they would use the word modify, right? So they would
Hmm.
say, let's modify it. Let's use the blocks. Let's use the straps. Let's
Hmm.
use the props. Um, and I've realized that when you're in a big body, it's more than just moving your belly. It's like also there's this feeling that you have about your belly, right? Like,
Hmm.
as a big bodied person, and especially as someone who grew up with a belly, um, you always have these feelings towards your body that might not always be positive because society will look at it as though, just like the word modification, right? Like I'm like some sort of deviation from the norm. Is
Yes, right. Because there's
but
like this ideal, apparently, and you're not in this ideal, so you're a deviation from that
exactly. And it just seems really almost hurtful to think that I would be a deviation from the norm instead of just a variation of a type of body, right?
body.
Just like
Exactly.
just like these poses. So that's how I started the workshop. And it started in 2019. At the end of 2019, it was when I hosted my first one, and I didn't expect it to be anything big, but I sold out the first one. And granted, it was a sort of small space, but still, I sold out, of
It's
this
amazing.
small space, and it felt really good to know that that many people needed this. And
It
then
goes to show you that that's exactly what was needed and that they felt comfortable to
exactly.
come into your space.
I know, and I can't tell you how many people over the years have come up to me and said that this is the first time that they've ever felt comfortable in a yoga space, or the first time that they've ever felt seen, the first time that they felt like they could actually do what was being taught, the first time
Hmm.
that they felt like truly connected with the practice.
Hmm.
I mean, it means the world to me to hear people say that because that's the goal, right? The goal is to
Hmm.
help people really figure out how they can make it work for them. Um,
Hmm.
for those folks that are like, oh, yoga's not for me, I'm like, maybe you just haven't had the right instructor, you
Right,
know?
exactly. How have
Because
people received that? Like, what has been the response to the workshop, at least the name from the workshop, from anybody, not per se larger bodied? Have you received responses on any of your posts? Positive, negative, neutral? How has it been received? Because that word is triggering for many.
fat,
Those that feel that they are, those that feel that we shouldn't be, those that that feel they are not. How has that been
yeah.
for you and how did you overcome that?
Well, it's funny because I thought about it a lot when I was creating the title of this workshop because I think in that moment, plus size was the word that everybody was using, or curvy. And I thought, why can't I just reclaim the word fat? I mean, people have used it against me. So if I can say it for myself, about myself, then they can't really use it against me,
Hmm.
because then it won't hurt me anymore. And also, like, I don't know, I'm Asian, right? And in Asian culture, if you're fat, it's just a fact. It's not like an offense, right? Like,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? People will
Yes,
be
I do.
like, it's not a bad thing. It's just a thing, right? Like
Hmm.
it's just them saying, "Oh, you've gained some weight." But in America, it's like if someone tells you you've gained weight,
It's like an insult.
oh, it's
Hmm.
so insulting. It's so hurtful. Um,
I
but
think it goes back to what you were saying about variations.
yeah,
It's just a different type of body size,
yeah,
like a different
exactly.
variation.
I mean, and sometimes I explain to my students, especially like when I teach kids yoga, I explain
Mm.
to them that there are so many variations of different, like think of the trees that we see outside, right? There's palm trees, there's oak trees, whatever. There's a ton of different types of trees, and they all provide different things, right? Some of them provide a lot of shade. Some of them just provide beauty. Some of them provide fruit. And so it doesn't make any one of them less special than the other. They're just you and that's okay,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know? And I think that's the best way I can explain it to children. And I do the same thing with kind of like dogs and cats, right? Like there's so many different kinds of dogs. Some people like big dogs, some people like little dogs, so many
Yeah.
different kinds. So there's so many different kinds of bodies too, and that's okay. And we can
Hmm.
appreciate all these different bodies without having to judge or compare.
Hmm.
And so fat asana So the word asana, as you probably know, means pose or posture in
Yeah.
Sanskrit. So all the yoga poses, if you say them in Sanskrit, end with the word asana. So even like shavasana, right? The very last pose that you do, corpse pose, or
Mhm.
utkatasana, chair pose. I mean, they all end with asana. And so, yeah, I mean, when I was coming up with the title, it was like, oh, how can I wordplay this to make it fun? And it's almost like, fat ass. But then it's asana, right? So,
Yeah.
and like I said, it was really, partially to reclaim the word fat. And then, of course, I didn't want to offend anybody by using wordplay with this Sanskrit word. So I even chatted with some friends that I have in India and some Indian American girls that I know who teach yoga.
Mhm.
And, I guess because I got a stamp of approval,
Yeah.
then I felt a little bit better about the wordplay because the
Mhm.
last thing I want to do is offend anyone or even offend like the practice of yoga. I don't want to.
Of course, you're trying to empower actually by reclaiming that word and,
Exactly.
taking the stigma and the pain out of what that word means for a lot of people. And by doing that, you basically take away the dagger that people use to just kind of break people down that are making, because there's a big stigma about body size and mobility or inability,
Hmm.
saying that like they're together, like they're
I
mean
know.
the same thing.
It's wild. And so this past weekend, I just taught Love My Fat Asana at a national fat conference. So, FatCon is something that happens every year, and it's a whole bunch of different leaders and entrepreneurs and educators and healers and so many different people in different industries, but everybody's fat. And so they all kind of come together to offer whatever it is that they're offering. I mean, the variety is crazy. Tattoo artist, whatever. There's just so many. Mermaid, pool party, all the things.
Amazing.
And so I offered, yeah, it was so great. So I offered my yoga workshop. It was very well received. And it was just also really empowering to be in a space with a whole bunch of big bodies. Because as you just said, a lot of people think that big bodied folks can't do whatever. They can't stretch, they can't be strong. And I will tell you, I just met the fifth strongest woman in the world, and she's my size or maybe even a little bit bigger than me. And she is, I mean, incredible, can hold like 450 pounds on her shoulders while she does squats. It's like crazy to see big bodies being very strong, really empowering, very, very inspirational. And to be able to be in a space where we can like really amplify these voices of these um we were calling them fat icons because it was, so the thing is called the convention is called Fat Con, right? And so they would have these
Yes.
stickers that's just a fat icon, and so everybody's walking around as a fat icon, which is really cool. um just really special to be in community with a whole bunch of big bodied folks and know that everyone is being celebrated. And then they had, I mean, all kinds of big bodies in wheelchairs, trans bodies where you could see their post-op scars, you know um people over 40, there was like meet and greets for all these different groups, and then even like BIPOC, big bodied folks, meet and greets for these people as well. So it was nice to just be able to not only be in community with the fat folks, but also be in like these sub communities where
Mhm.
you just feel like very connected and very
Mhm.
seen. Um,
It's this kind of constant, I have this love hate slash admiration for my bodies at many times. It's this back and forth thing. And I didn't really need, because I used to always say, like, why do I need to have a role model? Why can't I just do it on my own? And you think that that's really necessary. But really, I noticed that sometimes it is, because sometimes you're in such a space and it goes up and down in my body. At this point in my life, I'm amazed at the things that I can do with this body. And then I go back and forth in terms of the way that it looks, obviously. You have your feelings, about that. But I'm in the best place physically, the health, as well as the ability to do the things that I want at this time in my life. But the stigma that's also outside of it, the look, that really is like this ongoing struggle. And seeing seeing people like you is
Mm.
truly amazing and inspiring, but also comforting in a way that I didn't think I need it, right? Because I was like, I don't need, why is it all this big thing now about body? Everything is body positivity, and a lot of people complain about it now because they feel, oh, it's taking over. And I'm thinking, wow, positivity is now a negative. When did that happen? The fact that people feel good about themselves, that they feel good inside their bodies is really triggering. And I've been thinking about this and I wonder how you feel about it. I think sometimes I have this example in my mind. I remember when I went to school, the way that I studied was different from other people, because of the way that I absorbed information. So what a person needed to maybe like read constantly for the entire weekend, if I was really like attentive in school at that moment, that was enough absorption for me to take it. And I remember people being really mad that I got to swim or do something on the weekend and not study and
Mm.
be able to have a good grade. And I feel like somehow it's very similar, because some of the drive that people in different bodies have is because they have this ideal and they work so hard for that ideal. So, how can you, in that body, get to enjoy the privilege of being happy in your body, being able to move because the ideal that they were striving for is to reach that, and you're not close to what they think that ideal is. How do you turn that around, and how do you work with folks that you teach here, facilitate their learning and their growth? How do you transform that for them, and what are your thoughts about that anyways?
Well, first, I want to say thank you for the kind words and saying that it was that I have been some sort of source of inspiration for you. That's really heartwarming to hear.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
But I hear you, and I feel like to your point, it's not just when people are like, "Oh, I've been trying to do this thing or I've been trying to stay fit and how dare you in your fat body be joyous in a bikini when I've been trying to get in a bikini." It's really like anybody who doesn't feel comfortable in their own skin is going to
That's
feel like
mm-hmm.
they can attack someone who is comfortable in their skin, right?
Yes,
Like, how
right.
dare you have joy when you're not as good as I think I should, that kind of.
Yes, yes. Uh-huh.
I tell this to my kid all the time where I'm like, if someone is in pain,
Mm-hmm.
then they're probably going to be mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you don't know what that pain is. Sometimes it's not for you to understand. But
Mm-hmm.
knowing that if somebody is mean to you, they're probably in pain. And, you just have to accept that it's usually not about you. Almost
Mm-hmm.
always, it's not a personal thing. It's like, and even if it feels like it's directed at you, it's still not really about you sometimes. It's about
Mm-hmm.
them, you know? And I was one of those people. And so I think that I can understand it from that perspective where I remember being invited to a boat party 15 years ago or so, and because I did not feel comfortable in my skin, I remember making fun of the boat party. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's lame. I wouldn't want to do that anyway.
Right,
That's
right.
stupid. And at the end of the day, it's really just because I didn't feel good in my own skin. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to accept that ugly truth and
Mm-hmm.
know that if I just loved myself a little more and appreciated, my body for what it is, then I could also accept and love other people's bodies and not
Mm-hmm.
feel the need to just throw daggers because I'm jealous.
Right.
So when it comes to teaching people, like I said, with my child, it's really just making sure she knows that people are in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, I think that's what it really boils down to. And so when we can see ourselves acting in these ugly ways and we can face those ugly truths, then we can start to do the real work of like loving
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. I think for me, loving my body is a journey that is not linear at all. I think, there was a point in time where I had this epiphany that this body has carried me all over the world and I've been so mean to her.
Mm-hmm.
And why am I mean to her? Like, she's done so much for me and she's been so resilient and I've mistreated her. Um, and so then that was like the starting point of me loving my body. But even today, I mean, that was years ago. And even today, I can catch myself at a bad angle in the mirror and say, oh, I don't like the way my stomach looks or my double chin or
Mm.
whatever it is. I can have my moments of insecurity too. But then I have to like jump back in and talk to myself as a best friend would and
Mhm.
say, I wouldn't say this to my own best friend.
Exactly.
So why in
Exactly.
the world would I say it to myself?
So true.
Yeah. Did that answer the question?
Absolutely. And more. And I'm just really thankful, and I know that there's so much more that I can really ask you. I was telling you before we started, I think we're going to have multiple conversations, and I would love to have you here more and more, because I think there's more depth to it. And what you're leaving me with in that last question makes me realize too that what you're doing with My Fat Asana workshop, and we didn't get to talk about it, the Brown Care Collective, which is
Mm.
for,
Hmm.
brown bodies and creating spaces for brown bodies to see people like you, like us, everywhere. And we'll share that as well. I'll share that on the page. But what you've left me with is that body positivity that's coming from, say, the fat body, the large bodied perspective, is really trickling down to all bodies. Because
Hmm.
once that positivity is there for your own body, there's not that need for comparison, or feeling that someone's more or less. It's just an acceptance and an appreciation of our own body. And I think the work that you're doing in the community, and just to keep sharing, sharing as much, and someone sees it. Someone sees it and someone is inspired. I am that person. So, I always say to myself, one is enough, right? Like one person
Yeah.
was inspired, and how does that change and work on the things that I keep doing and move forward, and the people that I encounter. So I'm so grateful for you joining us today, and I can't wait to share more with you in the future.
Yes, thank you so much, Helen. And I hope to have you in one of the Love My Fat
I
Asana
can't wait.
classes.
I'm coming.
Yeah, it's also like I said, it's nice to be in community, and to just breathe and stretch without feeling like eyes are on you,
Hmm.
and without
Hmm.
feeling like you have to prove something, without feeling like, you have to show up and be something that you're not, or try to
Yes.
fit into some box that you don't fit into. Like knowing that you could come into a space and really just be yourself and show up as yourself authentically and know that that is enough, and that it's valued and appreciated. So
So true.
yeah, I would love to have you in this space sometime.
I'll be there.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having me.
you.
This has been great.
Thank you.